Yes, two N's, two L's.
I find that if I turn my cell thingy off, if I turn the thing that's supposed to be green, if I turn that off, it helps kind of streamline all of that stuff.
We're always just dealing with last-minute technical difficulties, audience, but I think we are live now, so we'll get right into this. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Runner's High, presented by Canada Running Series. Runner's High is a collection of informal conversations with key and influential members of the world and business of running. My name is Kate Van Buskirk. Once again, I am very happy to be your host for today's discussion, and also a reminder that, as always, Runner's High is interactive, so you can pop those comments or questions into the comment section on the CRS Facebook page, and we will get to as many of those as we can at the end of our chat. And just before we begin today, we want to remind everyone that registration is now open for 3 exciting upcoming virtual races: the Under Armour Spring Runoff, the Banque Scotia 21 km de Montréal, and the Scotiabank Vancouver Half Marathon. So head over to CanadaRunningSeries.com to find out what you get with registering and to start your training today. So this afternoon, we are very happy to be joined by 2 amazing community leaders who are not only incredible athletes themselves, but also small business owners and coaches. And we're going to be chatting today about how to stay healthy, strong, and injury-free as you continue training for all of these upcoming spring virtual events and what we hope will be many in-person fall and winter events moving forward. Of course, we've all missed not only those in-person runs and races, but also our community gym and studio workouts. So today we're going to equip you with some tools to empower you to get after some at-home workouts involving activation and strength training to keep you running strong over the coming months. So without further ado, I will introduce our fabulous guests. Jess O'Connell is a Rio Olympian, a 17-time Canadian Championship medalist. I had to triple check that, Jess, that's amazing. And our national record holder in the indoor 3,000 meter. She is also a coach and one of the co-founders of Grit Athletic Coaching. She has degrees in exercise physiology, biology, and sports psychology from the University of West Virginia, and a master's in kinesiology from the University of Calgary. And Jess believes that the most important attribute an athlete can have is genuine, humble enjoyment and appreciation of sport and the opportunity that it creates. And I love that philosophy, Jess. Jess is joining us today from Calgary and a very good friend of mine. Hi, Jess.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I was so excited to get the invite.
We're so glad that you're joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
And our other fabulous guest today, Keighty Gallagher, is a former Canadian junior national heptathlete. And for those who don't know, the heptathlon involves competing in 7 different events, including the jumps, runs, and throws over the course of only 2 days. And she's always had a propensity for the jumping events in particular. She competed in track and field for the University of Oregon and has a business degree from Portland State University. She's channeled her athletic experience and her business savvy into creating tight club athletics, where she develops and leads creative, functional workouts for all levels of clients. And Keighty is joining us today from beautiful Courtenay, British Columbia. Welcome to Runner's High, Keighty.
Thank you so much for having me, Kate. It's a pleasure to be here.
We were just, the 3 of us, before we went live, discussing the weather, as I always do with my guests across the country. So I'm sitting here in Toronto and we just got some sunshine and it is above 0, which is amazing. Jess, how's the weather in Calgary?
It's so nice. In Calgary, every sunny day after a long winter just feels like heaven. So I don't know what it is. It's maybe 5 degrees outside, but it feels like plus 25. I love it.
Amazing. Yeah, it's always funny the difference in perspective. I find that in like March, if you get one of those warm days, everyone will be out in shorts and t-shirts, but the same temperature in September, everyone's like bundled up.
100%.
It's funny how that feels.
Yeah.
I think by that time in the summer, oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think by the time in the summer when like we're getting those lows, it's like people are craving to pull out their favorite sweaters and like, it's just like, it's sweater weather. So any excuse to pull them
Totally.
I'll take it.
No way. I'll take the sun. It's fine. My sweater can stay in the closet.
Fair enough.
Well, speaking of how are things in Courtenay? How's the weather on the island?
Oh, Courtenay, you know, Courtenay's a nice, very mild, balmy, 8 degrees today. It's a little bit overcast, nothing too wild. So great for great walking weather. Or
nice.
Maybe I'll talk about what the other things I like to do outside later on.
Perfect. Well, we'll get to that. We've got a lot to get to today. Ladies, again, we're so excited that you could join us. And as I mentioned, we're going to get into a whole range of topics, some movements and some exercises in a little bit. So I hope that our audience is wearing their stretchy clothes today so they can join in with some of these exercises. And we're also going to chat a bit about your coaching and your teaching philosophies. But right off the top, I would love for our audience to get a chance to know both of you a little bit better. So Jess, why don't you tell us about your business Grit and how you got started in the world of personalized run coaching?
Yeah, so as, oh my goodness, I almost called you Faye. As Kate was just saying, I am an athlete, I'm a runner, and I'm still competing in running. But after the 2016 Olympics, I lost my sponsorship, and I was like, oh goodness, I need to take things into my own hands. And if I want to continue competing forever and ever on my own terms, I need to be able to financially support myself. And so I approached a friend. Her name is Faye Stenning, and she was an all-Canadian runner at the University of Calgary. So she also has a Keighty degree, and we grew up together. Since running, she has really taken on the world of Spartan racing. She now lives in Manhattan. She's been on magazine covers, game shows. She's one of the world's best Spartan racers. So like obstacle course racing. So we were chatting and we were like, we think there may be a business opportunity here because this sport is fairly new, kind of niche, and no one knows how to train for it. No one at all. It really attracted a lot of CrossFitters who are now running these races that are 2, 3, 4, 5 hours long. They're like exclusively training in the gym and whatnot. And she has a personal training background. I'm an exercise physiologist. We were like, there's an opportunity here. We can create something. So we started an online business, mostly tailoring to obstacle course racers, but absolutely runners as well, or people who are just looking to get fit, just obstacle course racers, because that's who her audience is. But certainly lots of marathoners and ultra marathoners as well. It's all online, so we can take it anywhere, which is awesome because we have clients all over the world and I can work from wherever I'm training in the world. So it's been really compatible with my run training.
Jess, have you learned a lot about the world of obstacle course racing? Because I would imagine that that's not something you necessarily had a lot of exposure to before this business venture.
That's a great question. Correct. I've never done a Spartan race or an obstacle course race. It's really just a lot of functional fitness. It's a lot of pull-ups, a lot of grip strength, and a lot of general strength. So it's actually pretty compatible with run training because a lot of those principles carry over. But yeah, I didn't know what a multi-rig was or the specifications of how to get through the monkey bars easily. That was pretty foreign to me, and it's something I still don't super grasp. And so certainly that's Faye's realm, and we stick in our own lanes. I'll help with strength for runners. I'll help with endurance training, but she's really the obstacle specialist.
Awesome. And I was going to ask that, how you kind of break up and divide up your different realms, but that makes sense that you kind of come at it from your own specialization. And then it sounds like there's a bit of crossover too.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So Keighty, you've actually been out of the world of elite track and field for a little while now, but you've kept that passion for movement and for sport alive in, it sounds like, a lot of other ways. So can you tell us more about your journey with Tight Club Athletics and the evolution of your business?
Yes, so I left track and field because I felt like my spirit for athletics and for movement had been squashed. Whether it was the team or the coaching or just the general style of being part of the NCAA didn't really agree with me. I felt like movement at that point of my life after I graduated university, the movement was like punishment. And I really wanted to change that because, as we all know, movement is pure mental therapy as well as it comes with its physical benefits as well. But I knew that if someone who is able-bodied, white, privileged woman, feeling this way, I knew that I wasn't going to be the only one. And when I moved back to Vancouver, after being abroad for about 5 years, I made it my mission to try to change the way we feel about fitness and also pursue a journey of trying to find a creative hobby. And I was able to join those two missions, you could say, together with Tight Club Athletics. And this is 10 years ago at this point. Yeah, March 2012. So I guess 9 years ago. And I really had to rewrite and understand the language of movement from a perspective of someone who had never been represented in fitness at all. So whether people just had different interests growing up and weren't never saw themselves on a team before, or didn't have the financial means to access movement. I really had to do my work in understanding not only what my own barriers were, but other people's barriers. So that's been my mission with Tight Club, is to constantly keep learning and understanding what prevents people from accessing fitness, and then giving it and presenting it in a way that is compassionate and inclusive and coming from a place of love rather than a dark punishment place that kind of happened or kind of turned me onto this new way of viewing sport and movement.
What a beautiful statement. That's awesome, Keighty. I think that inclusivity piece is quite admirable, and it sounds like that's been quite a evolution for you as you've kind of gone through this journey over the last 10 years. So tell us more about what Tight Club Athletics actually is, because I understand that there's been, again, in terms of like that buzzword evolution or pivoting, there's been a lot that has changed over the last year. And of course, the pandemic has affected all of us in a lot of ways, you know, athletically, and then in terms of our small business owners as well. I'm sure you've both had to go through a number of different changes. So maybe you could tell us more about that side of the journey, sort of the business aspect of everything.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll keep the first part quite short. We started off back in 2012, meeting up one time a week outside in a field in my neighborhood. And that quickly evolved into turning my garage into like our home base, where we had an urban run club that became friends with Nike and did stuff like that. And it's also where I developed my mat classes. So all of my workouts that technically would then prep people to be able to run better, run safer. That's kind of where the mat work developed from. And then I started realizing that people were not really coming to the run stuff anymore. They like to come to the mat. So at that point, I realized I needed the next home base, and I opened and like fully built out and developed the Tight Club Field House, which was our brick and mortar location. So the evolution, talking about evolution, going from a one-woman show who was doing the social media, the design work, or some of the design work, all the programming, like riding my bike all over the city, doing personal training and leading these groups and building this really, really rad community, to then learning how to run a team and learning and understanding what management does and how to, you know, train trainers and how to take, I guess, the essence of these classes and streamline them and scale them. And that's really been such a fun journey in taking what I learned in university and putting it to the test. It's been quite a cool meeting of the worlds. And so I ran the studio for 5 years, and then the pandemic happened. And up until literally a year ago, I had never imagined my life would revolve around making sure that the shot is perfect and that my like technology gear is super tight. Like, digital was never something on my mind, and in a drop of a hat, I, you know, had to close the studio down and move everything online. So we got through the lockdown. We were able to foster a really fun community online, and we're able to get so many people through the hardest part of this pandemic together and really feeling the spirit of what Tight Club was in real life, but bringing it digital. And I knew that it was rocky, and I knew there was so much more to be done, and I really sensed the potential. And at that time, I was also experiencing my own mental illnesses, and realizing that at the point of where my company was and the financial perspective of it, like where we were at that point, I was going to have to lay some really key members of my team off, which meant carrying the load on my back. And at that point where I was mentally, I couldn't do it anymore. And so I had to really, truly pivot, like the real deal, scary kind, and cut ties with my actual physical studio. And I was lucky enough that my lease was up at the end of August, and I made the announcement at the end of July saying that this is going to be our last month open, and we're really going to push this online thing and really grow and grow the tight vibes. And so since then, I decided to take back my company in terms of being that one woman show again. And I just launched a new kind of brand called TCTV, which is an on-demand platform with over 120 different workouts and a live stream schedule. And I do believe that this is probably my best work yet. And it has allowed me to move home and spend time with my family, and also really think about what my future is going to look like, which I got married last year, and I want to spend some time in California while doing TCTV. So I kind of feel like this is the year of me, or for me, I guess, and learning how to bring my business with me. So that's been the journey of this year. It's been sad and exciting and scary, and like I'm very much in this place of I don't know what I'm doing or where I'm going, and that's okay. I'm going to take it day by day, which is actually a meme that I found that I really like.
I feel like all of that is so encompassing of not only so many of the guests we've had on this show, but just, the approach that many of us have had over the last year, where, it's been really hard and it's been an opportunity for growth. And I think all of these little silver linings that you've pulled out have also kind of been a recurring theme with a lot of the guests that we've spoken with in terms of kind of like tapping back into the things that are most important and sort of rediscovering your priorities or reshaping those into ways that feel genuine and good for you. So congratulations on the move to the TCTV, and we will talk more about how folks can learn about that. But it sounds like you've done a great job of maintaining that community engagement aspect without being able to work in person, which has been, of course, the biggest challenge for all of us, is how do we maintain a sense of community while we can't actually get together in any formal, traditional sense of community. So kudos, Keighty. That's great.
Thanks.
Yeah. Jess, I know that with Grit, and you mentioned this earlier, because your training and racing schedule has been so intensive for so long, it always made sense for you for this to be an online model. That being said, I'm wondering how the pandemic has affected your work with Grit and with Faye.
Well, first of all, Keighty, kudos, because that doesn't sound easy what you went through. And I've been watching lots of fitness businesses try and pivot and adapt. And it sounds like you did a really good job. Not everyone has, and it sounds like you did. So that's awesome.
Thanks, Jess. I appreciate that. It hasn't been easy.
Yeah, no kidding. But my story is so different, and I feel so lucky especially after hearing yours, because we were always online. And so we were very well set up for this, because we never had the expectation of in-person contact or training or like an in-person community. Since it's always been online, we didn't have to pivot or kind of convince people that it was just as good when we were like, is it? Like, that's just what we've always offered. So in that sense, we were so lucky. We were pandemic ready. But because I haven't been training as much, I'm still training, because I haven't been traveling and racing quite so much, I've had a lot more time to pour into marketing and business building and all the little things that were kind of the nice to haves and we should really do this someday, but we haven't bothered yet because I need to go on a plane to Europe or something like that. We actually did. And because of that, we've grown quite a bit. Our programming is all personalized. And so through the pandemic, it's been a lot of work reaching out to all of our clients and seeing what do they need. Their races are canceled. Every single one of them is training for a race or an event, and that's gone now. What does that mean? Do we do time trials? Do we not want to do time trials? Do we set up some sort of virtual race? Do we not bother because they're happy to just train? What do they need? So it required us to take our level of personalization that much further, which was time consuming, but sort of what you owe your clients, I think, especially if you want them to keep working with you. So the biggest thing that changed for us was having more time to put into the business, which has been worth it. And also just giving our clients what they wanted and what they needed in that moment.
Yeah, again, it's been so interesting to hear different people's stories of the pandemic, because I think that all of us, again, have been adjusting to this new normal. But Jess, it sounds like that was maybe a relatively smooth process for you, and again, that opportunity to grow. And I should just mention, it was funny when Keighty and I were talking on the phone the other day, we mentioned how, Jess, you come at everything with this like really fantastic scientific background, and Keighty has this great business savvy and this like marketing and advertising. And so I think there's maybe some potential crossover there for you two to do some cross-pollination in the future. But it sounds like you've both been really extended in your own personal ways during this time. Jess, on that note, again, you come at your coaching from this like very extensive scientific background. And I know that your work with runners in particular is pretty focused around injury prevention and overall strengthening. So tell us more about your personal coaching philosophy, and keeping in mind that everything has shifted a little with COVID, what your main goals are when you take on a new client.
So I really believe that all runners can probably benefit from some degree of strength training. And I'm not saying they have to be in the gym hours a week or anything like that, but some sort of at-home exercises or stability work or whatnot is going to make them more resilient. So runners to improve in running need to be injury-proof, and they need to be stable, and strength training can also lend to better form, running economy, posture preservation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So to prevent injuries, to improve stability, and to help your form. I'm sorry, I'm babbling here. I lost my train of thought midway through that sentence. But basically, the goal of any strength program for a runner should be injury prevention, stability, and improve form, maintain posture. That's not that hard to achieve as long as you're doing something. So the good news is you don't need to be in a gym necessarily under a ton of weight, loaded dumbbells, barbells, that sort of thing. You can achieve a lot of that at home with TheraBands or with milk jugs or something like that. So with runners, we really look at what their history is, what injuries they've had, and are they doing any of that yet? If they have had injuries, then certainly addressing perhaps why. If they haven't, then great. Have they done any stability work before? And then starting them at a level where they can do pretty basic exercises with proficiency, and then progressing them from there, because a lot of these really aren't that hard. They just need to get done.
And again, as runners, Jess, you and I had a conversation about this about a year ago, and we were talking about how runners love to run. And so it's often that strength training piece that can fall by the wayside when you're like, I've got a tempo on the schedule later this week. I've got a weekly mileage goal that I want to hit. Maybe I'm training towards a time trial. And like the running piece always seems like it gets done, but it's that strength training component that, and I'm not sure, maybe you can give us a little more insight there if you think it's just a lack of sort of a knowledge base about what they should be doing. Like why do you think runners tend to maybe shy away a little bit from that strength training?
I think a lot of it is just a lack of knowing what you should be doing. And a lot of it is fear of the weight room. I mean, I think there's a reason why runners are drawn to running a lot of the time, and it's because it's not in a gym. But yeah, I totally agree with you, Kate, that runners like to run, and anything that detracts from them is considered to be deviating from your goal. And it's not, because the best way to become faster as a runner is consistent running, and you can't run consistently if you're hurt. And all of that plays into each other. So it's just a very small thing that you can add into your routine to greatly improve the chances that you'll be able to continue to run.
And Jess, I hope you're okay with me saying this, but unfortunately, you're speaking from some personal experience here with the injury side of things.
Yeah.
I know you've dealt with your own fair share of that, and it sounds like you've been able to really integrate your own experience into the knowledge base that you're providing for your athletes, but also maybe helping with that buy-in. That if they just put that time in a few days a week, they're going to really see some rewards. as a result.
Yeah, it's true. I've had a lot of injuries over my running career, and it's not from lack of time in the weight room because I've spent a lot of time there. But when I'm injured, I spend even more time trying to work on my deficiencies, trying to make my body more bulletproof. If I can't run, what can I do to get myself ready to run again and whatnot? And I've seen it time and time again in other athletes, just these little deficiencies or inefficiencies that could so easily be addressed with a few exercises, and they actually do make a difference. My physio always tells me that 1 in 14 people do their physio exercises, and they're so hard to do, and I don't know why. I think it's because when you're doing them, you're admitting to yourself that you're injured, and because you don't see a benefit immediately. It's not like 1 second later you're stronger or more stable, but I promise you guys, they actually do something, and you would be shocked if you were just very compliant with very fine exercises. You will feel more stable, more bulletproof, more capable.
And we're going to give you all a demonstration of a few of those in just a moment. So hang tight on that. But before we get to that, Keighty, you work with a wide range of clients, many of whom you said don't necessarily have specific running or competitive goals, but they're, just trying to get the most out of themselves and have fun while pushing themselves. And when you and I were speaking earlier, you used this term that I really loved, in which you said your style involves sport-specific training through a lifestyle lens. Tell us what that means and what that kind of translates to in your classes.
Ooh, good question. I also wanted to say that, like, Jess, I am so on board with everything that you were saying. I think that no matter what sport I don't know. I want to say that no matter what sport you're doing, whether it's a sport or just a lifestyle activity, like having kids and running around with them, or grabbing your groceries, is that stability and core focus training is what's going to help us do the thing we like to do outside longer. And so I think the fun part of what I get to do is, because like what you said, I see people who have never been in gyms before, so I get that crew. I get people who are kind of like me, who have had an athletic background but have been kind of out of it, who enjoy a little bit more of the sport feel, and everyone in between in that spectrum. And so what I try to do is find a common ground and really try to meet them where they're at, but then try to bring in my own little spice to it. So I like to bring in games. I like to bring in, like, for me, it's really what makes this so much fun for me is that I can bring in creativity. And throughout university, I didn't really hang out with athletes. I hung out with a lot of artists and people who had a lot of creative hobbies. And I truly do see the art in writing workouts that can be captivating and fun and creative. And so I try to bring that into these workouts too, so that for the people who have never really experienced sport or training before, that this doesn't really feel like training. It feels like fun movement and it makes sense. There's a flow. And for my pals who have some sort of athletic background, they're able to be like, oh, I know this movement. This is something that my physio wants me to do. And I'd be like, ha, gotcha. So it's like a real shit mix in my workouts of new language, familiar physio influenced movement put together into a game to make a movement experience that will always translate into a functional life off your mat. But then also, while it's happening, hopefully having you be like, oh, this is actually kind of fun. I like this. And I like how it makes me feel. And my coach is nice. I like her.
Keighty, I think that's so genius. I think that that's probably like the work that as you said, Jess, like every physio, every like run coach is trying to do, is find a way to like trick their athletes into doing the things they don't want to do in a gamified way that's actually fun. And you had mentioned earlier that one of the reasons that you were so turned off from competitive sport after a while was that it just felt like punishment. And it sounds like this is the opposite of that. Like you found a way to sort of, again, like very sneakily work these exercises in that are actually making people feel better, but they're not even recognizing that it might be that same movement because they're having so much fun doing it.
Yep. Also, oh, I'd also want to throw in here, Kate, when we were chatting yesterday, you had mentioned applicable movement that it may not make sense in the moment, but there's always a really important why. I always say, usually when we're doing some sort of a glute activation, like donkey kicks or glute bridges or something that's like really terrible in the moment and like you're crying internally and maybe externally at the same time, I always like to bring in this one experience I had, which was like grade 12 math. And you're like, why am I doing this? And your teacher's always like, trust me, you'll need this in life at some point. It may not be the exact equation, but the problem solving skills that you're having to develop to get through this problem, you're going to need this later on. So I always like to think about that when we're doing those, butt crying movements. This all will make sense.
You are the first person that I've heard make some sort of connection between grade 12 math, which I loathed, and donkey kicks, which I've learned to like more, but are still not my favorite thing. But that was a pretty keen observation there, Keighty. Well done. Jess, as of course a runner yourself, and as we've mentioned, unfortunately, someone who's dealt with more than your fair share of running related injuries, what are some of the main things to be mindful of as runners when it comes to the strength training and injury prevention work? I'm wondering what some of the main injuries are that you see with your running clients and the main ways that we can work to avoid those.
So we see a lot of knee injuries and a lot of Achilles injuries, which is the injury that I know the most intimately in and out. Kate too, Keighty too. All of us. Okay. I've never had a knee injury, so I find that a bit more foreign, but I can still understand it enough. One thing that we get everyone to do off the bat is activation exercises. So these are a series of exercises, and this is what I'll show you guys in a bit, that you do before every single run. And to be completely honest, I thought this was hocus pocus until about 5 or 6 years ago. I remember, and this is funny because Kate, you are the host here. I remember seeing Kate doing these exercises at the track, and I was like, "What is she doing? This is so weird and so dumb." And I actually got a bit resentful. I was like, "Oh, Kate's always wasting her time doing these hip bridges. And like, this is so bougie and over the top." Okay, so now I am a slave to activation exercises, and I am so sorry for judging you internally. And maybe I wouldn't have been hurt for the last decade if I had done them as well. But basically, activation exercises, I was always like, activate what? So the idea behind activation exercises is to warm up the neuromuscular connection between basically your brain and your glutes. Because when we sit or sleep or live our very sedentary computer lifestyles, the connection between your brain and your glutes gets shut off. I don't really know why, but it seems like a huge evolutionary disadvantage, but it makes it harder to turn your glute muscles on and use them when you're running, even though they're the biggest, most powerful, beefy muscles that should be doing most of the work. And if they're not functioning properly, then your movement's going to be offloaded with your hamstrings, your quads, your hip flexors, your calves, your Achilles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really easy to wake this connection up just with a few quick 5-minute exercises before a run. So that's the first thing we give all of our athletes. Most of them have never done them before. And very, very often the feedback in our second month call is like, "I feel great. I feel so stable on my runs. I feel so strong and powerful." So yes, goal achieved. And then
you find that people find notice a difference fairly quickly then, it sounds like, because I know that that's one of the problems, right? Is that when you go for a run, you can tell that you've gone for a run. But when you do a couple of glute bridges, you might not always feel like you're doing much, but it sounds like you can notice if this isn't something you're used to incorporating into your normal routine, you can see some benefits pretty quickly, it sounds like.
Yeah, like you're probably not getting, I can tell you, you're not getting stronger. Like you're not building muscle in your glutes necessarily, but just being more connected and more neuromuscularly warmed up, you do notice a difference very, very quickly, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing we always give runners is a lot of single leg stability, because when you're running, you're always on one leg or you're in the air. So that's one mistake that a lot of people who do go to the gym make, is if they're runners, they'll only do double leg squats or deadlifts or whatnot. And there is a place for that, but there's certainly also a place for being able to coordinate your body on only one leg.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me because I used to work with some clients as well who hadn't done single leg stuff, and they would have the best squat form. They would be so incredible on two legs. And then I think, and less about, the coach necessarily, and more about the athlete. As soon as you ask them to do something like even stand on one foot without a shoe on and close their eyes and maintain their balance, it's pretty incredible. The strongest person in the gym often has a hard time just maintaining their ability to stand on one leg for 10 seconds with their eyes closed. And that usually kind of points out where the deficiencies are, eh?
Totally, totally. And the last thing we give runners, I just thought of this as you were saying that, is mobility, which I think pulls into strength. So runners absolutely need to be mobile through their back, their T-spine, so that they can swing properly. That transfers power from their arms to their legs and also keeps their spine moving in a way that is best, I guess. Otherwise, you can't twist through the top of your back. You have to twist through the bottom, and that's really not ideal. You need mobility through your hips and through your ankles and through your big toe, so you can push off. And I think a lot of programs, there's nothing wrong with being more mobile in other areas for sure, but those are must-haves as runners. And so we put in a lot of work, both through like dynamic exercises, making sure you have that range of motion, but also strengthening through that range of motion so that you have control through it.
That's great, Jess. And again, we're going to demonstrate some of these in a moment. But maybe just before we get there, because I think that these words get used interchangeably sometimes, but they mean very different things. Can you briefly explain to us the difference between flexibility and mobility? Because I think a lot of people think, oh, to be more mobile, I'll just stretch a lot. And that's not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. That's funny. So flexibility is basically the ability to move a limb through a range of motion, but mobility means you have control through that range. So for example, if you're just lying on your back and someone helps you raise your hamstring up, that's how flexible your hamstring up is. But like you raising it yourself and being strong through that range, that would be more a measure of mobility. So it's really important to be mobile more so than flexible, because if you're able to move through a range of motion, but you're not strong, that's where injuries happen. So if you can swing your hip back really far, but you have no strength there, it just kind of flops, you're not stable. That's where an injury could happen. So the best way to increase mobility is through some dynamic movements. So something like maybe even like a lunge where you're going into and out of a range of motion. Something like that. That's off the top of my head. Or doing strength exercises through that range of motion. So if it's weighted, that helps even more, because then you're strengthening as you're going through a movement.
That's great. Thank you, Jess, for that definition and that differentiation. Keighty, I'm just seeing you nodding along to everything Jess is saying. It sounds like this is really resonating with you. And I was going to ask you next about, I know that a lot of your workouts and your classes have a full body focus, but that you also really prioritize the core. So I wanted to ask you about the importance of that core strength, but I'm also curious what your thoughts are on some of this mobility work, because it sounds like this is, again, really resonating with you.
I mean, so what's been really fun, learning how to explain core training and the importance of core training with some of my clients is to teach that, or what am I trying to say here? First is to share that your core is not just your abs, which a lot of people, that's what they think your core is, just your abs. And so it's been really fun understanding and teaching the concept that basically anything that your limbs are attached to is your core. And that core training, when I kind of use core training interchangeably with stability and mobility. I like to wrap it all into one kind of concept with my movements. But essentially, I like to use this analogy. Imagine you're standing on a canoe in the middle of the ocean, and you try to jump off that into the water, how unstable it is, and how you may not get very far. Or you could even use the analogy of standing on sand and trying to jump. But when you get yourself on, let's go back to the boat. You bring that boat onto land, and you're able to jump off of it. Imagine that boat, the surface that it's on, if it's in the water, that's a really soft, non-active core, versus if that boat is on hard land, that would be essentially what an activated core would, the effect of an activated core would, how it would be if you were to move or jump or react to it. So having a strong core for athletes, it correlates to performance, also injury prevention, and of course it does to non-athletes as well. And it also correlates to, you could say, like more confidence in their movement and injury prevention, and allowing access for new movements and new things to do. So the core is so important, and everything is core.
Keighty, that's about the most Canadian analogy you could use. I think, like, imagine yourself standing in a canoe. And in your case, in the middle of the ocean, which I'm very jealous of. We don't have an ocean here, but I'm about 800 meters from a big lake. So I can imagine what it would be like to stand in a canoe in the middle of Lake Ontario. But that's a great way of sort of framing it, and probably offering a little more explanation for your clientele. That's great. Well, ladies, let's get into this, because we promised everyone that we would demonstrate some of these movements. And just a note for our audience that we are going to be posting the movements that you see both Jess and Keighty performing today. We'll do some little videos and put those up on the Canada Running Series social media channels, so that you can follow along down the road and make sure that you're doing all the same exercises they are in the correct way. But Jess, we're going to start with you, and I know you have to get set up, so we'll give you a second to do that. But Jess is going to demonstrate, as she mentioned, some of these main activation and mobility exercises that she believes are key, that she prescribes to all of her athletes before they head out for their runs. And after she's done that, we're going to move into some great, more dynamic movement patterns that Keighty often prescribes to her clientele, and thinks that are really important for staying healthy and getting into full ranges of movement. So Jess, take it away.
All right, I'm going long distance here. Can you hear me okay? All right, I'd like to point out that I'm wearing green pants for St. Patrick's Day. So happy St. Patrick's Day, guys. So these, I'm going to give you 5 exercises. That sounds like a lot, but you don't need to do many sets or reps. And this is what I do before every single run. And this is probably what Kate does too. So the first one is, like we just talked about, it's a mobility exercise. And this is for your T-spine, your upper back, basically. And like I just alluded to, you need to be able to move through your upper back. Your vertebrae in your upper back are designed to have about 45 degrees of motion, but your lower back vertebrae are only designed to have 2 or 3 degrees of motion. But if you're really stiff through here, which pretty much all of us are, then you have to rotate through your lower back, and that can cause a lot of lower limb problems. So if you work in an office, I can guarantee you need this exercise. It's very, very simple. If you're on all fours, and it's just threading the needle. So taking an arm, reaching it under as far as you can, and then reaching to the sky as far as you can. So just 5 reps of these per side, nice and slow, making sure that you're going as far in your range as you can. Okay, the next one is a core activator. So hopefully I'm not stealing Keighty's thunder, but I like to turn on a core before running. So my favorite go-to is a dead bug. So you're going to lie on your back, push your belly button into the ground, and squeeze your ribs down. So you should feel a little bit of a core burn right off the bat. Then raise your legs into the air. If you're a beginner, you can just draw one leg out, then the other. If you're more advanced or more coordinated, you can alternate arms and legs. So do about 10 of these, making sure your back and your belly button is always pushing into the ground, not like this. Okay? The next one is a hip bridge.
Just to clarify, you're wanting to have contact with the ground the whole time. Is that what you're saying? So that you're not arching your back?
Yeah. So correct. So you're pushing your spine into the ground the whole time, or your belly button down.
Do you ever recommend putting anything underneath to be able to feel that contact, like a towel roll or anything?
I don't think you need to. I've always known that you, like, as long as you think pushing down with your belly button, then you should be able to feel the ground. But that could help, I guess, if you're used to doing that.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. The next one is a glute activator. So a hip bridge using a mini band. You can get these on Amazon or at a physio clinic. They're like $3 there. The best piece of exercise equipment I would ever recommend. So take it, again, you're on your back, wrap it around your legs. Again, think about activating your core a little bit, maybe push your belly button into the ground. And now you're gonna squeeze your glutes and raise your hips up into the air and down. If this is really, really easy, you can also do it with a single leg.
Jess, are your knees together as you do that? I'm wondering what the purpose of the mini band is.
They are not together. So I'll do one facing the camera.
Great, thanks.
So the band is pulling my knees together and I'm slightly pushing them apart so that they stay straight. Not like this, but straight.
Is
so
that
that's
like
just
hip width?
Sorry?
Hip width apart?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just sort of another reminder. It's a cue to use your glutes a little bit more. The mistake that people will make with this is that they'll really overuse your hamstrings. So just think about squeezing your butt before you go up, and that's going to activate those glutes instead of everything else. Next exercise, we're standing now. Oh, that is a bad camera angle. Katie's going to be better at this than me. Standing on one leg, band around your ankles, and then just doing taps to the side and the back. The tricks for this exercise is you want your standing leg to be very stable. You don't want to be jetting it out like this. And you don't want to be having your knee cave in. Those would be the biggest cheats. You will probably feel this exercise in your standing leg, not your moving leg. So most people think they should be feeling it here and they're dragging their leg all over the place. This is the leg that's working because it's stabilizing you. You want to feel it in your glute. If you don't, just play around with positioning. And the last one is a single leg squat. So take that band, just lift it up. And then on a single leg, just a few small squats. I like this one as an activator because I can really feel a push off with my leg. And so it just sort of reminds me that propulsion should come from my glutes, not from anything else. So all of these exercises I do 5 to 10 of each, and that's it. So this should take no more than 3 to 5 minutes.
Awesome, Jess. And I think you've already said this, but one of the big keys that you've mentioned to me before is that your activation should never leave you sore. It's just about turning things on and firing them rather than, like you said, actually building muscle or trying to break muscle down. You shouldn't get sore from them. You should just feel turned on.
Exactly. It's a true warm up, not a strength building situation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jess. That's great. And as we mentioned to our audience, we will make sure that we post a video after the fact with Jess demonstrating these again, so that you can make sure that you are tuning into her and doing them correctly. And as Jess gets settled back down, we're going to turn it over to Keighty so she can. So I think Jess is kind of like the warm up, and then Keighty's probably warm up part 2 as we move into some more dynamic movement patterns. So take it away, Keighty.
All right. I love those moves you put together, Jess, because I think that what I'm about to show y'all will work really nicely, because you've activated, and now we're going to continue activating and stabilizing.
Perfect.
With my classes that I teach, I follow a very similar flow. I call it the functional flow, where we mobilize, we activate, we stabilize, and then once we've done that, which I believe is the most important part of the workout, and oftentimes will take like at least like a half the time. At that point, once we have mobilized, activated, and stabilized, at that point we can then move into lifting and loading, and one could say that the fun part, but I think this is the fun part. So I have gamified this in a sense. I like to, so when I sit down and write these out, I like to think about flow and how this is going to feel for newbies, but also people who have done this before. And this is going to be in a pyramid format. I'm also calling this, I call this the booty blender. And it just means that we're taking very simple movements to start with, and then as we climb that mountain, we're going to be blending into more dynamic, more bigger, more functional movements, so that at the end, that biggest, most functional movement you're going to be super ready for, we'll take a little break, and then we reverse it. So we start with that biggest, most dynamic movement, and then we work our way down. So that we see that there's flow, we see that there's a start and an end, and then we can go on to our run or our whatever we're doing afterwards. So follow along. Let's see, I'm just gonna, I think we can see this. I'll just pin mine for a second so I can see. Okay.
Yeah, space looks great, Keighty.
Oh, thanks. I am not wearing, actually, I am wearing something green. I have green on my shorts, so there's that. We are going to start down into a plank position. So Jess had us in that supine position for our dead bugs. We're really just flipping ourselves around into a prone. So with our nice tall plank, we want our shoulders over top of those wrists. Option 1, we can stay here. And if you want something a little bit more spicy to activate more fully of your core, we're going to start by taking a shoulder tap, shoulder tap, shoulder tap. And your goal here is to try to keep your shoulders and your hips as square to the ground as you can. If shoulder taps feel pretty easy, go shoulder tap, knee drive, knee drive. And this really helps to fire up your transverse abdominals and everything really, your shoulders, hips, glutes. So this is your exercise A. Exercise B, we're going to come on down onto your knees. We're going to take it to hydrants. I'll turn around so you can see me. So with our hydrants, I want you to think about pushing through both legs, not just one. So if we're going to start on the right side, we're going to abduct that right leg away. Meanwhile, we're actually pushing this leg away as well. It's just not moving. So as we abduct, we want to be externally rotating. And if you notice, I'm trying my best to hide my foot behind my femur. This is a really nice isolated way to activate your glute med. After about 30 seconds on the right, we'll go 30 seconds to the left. And I don't want to see your body rocking around like a king, whatever. Okay, stay stable as you can. That's exercise B. Exercise C, notice we're adding on, it's becoming a little bit more dynamic. We've got a side lunge. And as we take it to a side lunge, I want you to extend your arms so that your elbows are by your ears. This is going to help prevent rounding down forward. So we want to keep a nice tall chest. Notice if we look down the sides of our feet, is parallel to the end of your mat. Okay, we don't want to be here following through. We want to stay square. So from here, option 1, we can just stand up and do it without a step. This is going to be the lowest impact version. But if this is feeling good, we can take it to a step. So stepping, landing soft, landing soft. Good. So I think that's C. Exercise D, we're going to add a little bit more impact to this. So let's start off on the right side. We'll stand on this right leg. We're going to take a little bit of a bound. This can be as big or as small as you want. We're going to hold it. And I thought this one, actually, I'm throwing this one in. I've done this in class before, but since we haven't done a ton to bring some heat to our shoulders, let's do 10 shoulder swings. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10. And then onto the other side, balance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is really challenging our core. This is continuing to warm up those shoulders. Good. All right, what's next? My next
Good job,
one.
Keighty.
Oh, thanks. This next one, we're gonna call this the last movement of our pyramid. We'll then take a break and then you can do it again on the way down. But the last movement of this series is a step, step, stall. It's really fun if you're doing this to music and you can hit up the beat. It helps make that stall really fun, but it also challenges your stability. It gets your core working. And also going back to mobility, this helps strengthen that mobility because we're finding our control in a specific movement. So it looks like this: step, step, stall, hold for a moment. Step, step, stall, woo, hold.
It's harder than it looks.
Way harder than it looks.
Keighty was she lost her balance just to show us what not to do. I appreciate that.
So that is your functional flow. What am I calling that? We can call that the runner's high mountain. The runner's high pyramid. The runner's high pyramid. So 4 movements. Take a break and then bring it back down.
Fantastic, Keighty. Those are amazing. Thank you for demonstrating. You got a little bit of a sweat going on there. I appreciate that.
Oh yeah,
glow. Yeah,
it's my glow.
Yeah.
Those are awesome. I love them.
I think a lot of
Jess,
runners
Jess, do they pass your test?
Yeah, totally. I love that there's a lot of like balance and stability on a single leg because it is harder than it looks. And it's really revealing when you try and balance with your leg up in the air, like you were like driving and you're like, oh my gosh, this is actually hard, but this is how I run. If this is that hard when I'm not running, then what am I doing when I am? So
yeah. I think a lot of runners will recognize that last one as like a very advanced A skip. You know, when we're doing our warm-up drills, the A's, B's, and C's, that A where you have to like hold it partway through is really tough. And the other thing I like, Keighty, that you did there was you incorporated some lateral movement. And I know, Jess, at the beginning of our talk, you spoke about how your work with Faye has really exposed you to some more lateral movements as well, because those are perhaps more important in the obstacle course racing world. But I think as runners, when everything is so linear and forward moving, we sometimes forget the importance of working on that lateral stability. So I think that's great, Keighty. I call them skater jumps, those side to side bounds, and I definitely incorporate them too. And I find that they're a great stabilizer. So awesome exercises, ladies. That was great. Thank you for that. High five.
Yeah.
And again, you'll be able to follow along these on the CRS social channels, and then also visit. Actually, you know what? Why don't we plug it now since we're talking about this? Jess, how can folks follow you and Grit and learn more about your coaching program?
Yeah, we have a website, www.gritcoaching.net, and we're pretty active on Instagram. We post a lot of training tips Tuesdays. That was yesterday. Lots of athlete profiles, sharing stories. And we also have a podcast called the Nitty Gritty Training Podcast. So our Instagram is @grit_coaching.
Fantastic. And again, we'll link that for sure. Keighty, how can folks follow you?
They can follow us on Instagram. We're also pretty active on the IG. It's @TightClub. And our website is tightclubathletics.com. We're running a 7-day free trial for our TCTV platform. And right now we're just in the middle of the Tight Life Challenge. So we're having a real fun time, and on the platform, you get access to over 120 different workouts, free access to the live stream classes. I know, I've been busy. And access to our community Slack channel, where we focus on community building, staying connected, interactive human stuff.
Fantastic. So, I can't wait to sign up for some of those. That'll be so fun. That's great. Awesome, ladies. Well, you know what? I've taken up an hour of your time. I really appreciate you both joining us today on Runners High. Before I let you both go, you've just been beacons of light today and positivity. And so I thank you both for that. But as you know, individuals who, of course, have experienced the personal and professional challenges of the last year, Jess, maybe we'll start with you. If you have any final words of inspiration or motivation for our listeners as we move, again, fingers crossed, towards some more sunny, warmer days, but we're not quite there yet. What messages would you like to leave our audience with before we say goodbye to you today?
I'd say that you can never discount the power of exercise. Like, it just feels so good to get out there, sweat, and get some endorphins flowing. And that's something, you don't need gyms to do that. You can go outside for a run. You can log on to Tight Club TV. There are a lot of barriers that the pandemic has created, but there's also a lot that you can do. And it can be very intimidating to start an exercise program if you're new to running, but it doesn't have to be big and overwhelming. Start slow, but try and keep consistent, because it really is life-changing, and no one regrets going out for a run or for getting a sweat on. It's just so good for you, and it makes you feel so good. Doesn't always feel good to start, but that changes really quickly. Even I, after a long layoff from running, I'm like, I understand why people don't like this. This is really difficult, but you just have to fight through that, and it unlocks so much capability and potential for you.
Thanks, Jess. Fantastic words. Keighty, I think that probably will resonate with you, because we don't even know what this is yet, but you gave us a little teaser right before we started this live today that you are on a running journey of your own. And I'd love if you could share what that is with us.
Yes. So I've found that every single time I try to get back into running, I blow out something. And normally it's my calves, both calves, always at the same time, my Achilles. So it's usually when I'm like, I'm just going to go out and run a 7K, no big deal, says the person who was a long jumper who would take 17 or 18 steps.
Yeah.
So now I'm trying this new thing, which is going to be the most chillest version of me trying to be a runner ever, which is, well, for example, I go out on morning walks with our dog, and I put on this jacket. It's my sleeping bag jacket. And so my running looks like this. I run for 2 telephone poles, and then I walk to the next one wearing this and a toque. And that's how I'm getting back into running. So
good for you.
Saving you from yourself.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, I can't stride that big in like my flasher jacket. So it's and you know what? It's been 3 days in a row, and I'm not broken.
Awesome.
And also, I can still be a runner. So it's realizing that there's no one way to be a runner. You can be a telephone pole runner like I am and still be a runner, or you can be an Olympian like Jess and absolutely be a runner. So that's my message there. That's
yeah,
my
people have this complex that runners are some sort of elite thing. Everyone is a runner. I think that's so silly. Yeah. Everyone, if you can run, which literally everyone can, then you're a runner.
Yeah, totally.
Fantastic final takeaway messages, ladies. We really, really appreciate it. And Keighty, think about how good it's going to feel when you get to shed that sleeping bag jacket, and those telephone poles, you're just going to glide past them. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Well, again, you can follow both Keighty and Jess on their various social media channels. Check out Tight Club Athletics TCTV, check out Grit Coaching online as well. We want to remind everyone that once again, registration is now open for the Under Armour Spring Runoff, the Banque Scotia 21 km de Montréal, and the Scotiabank Vancouver Half Marathon virtual races. Head on over to CanadaRunningseries.com before these all fill up and find out what you can get with registering and start your training there today. Once again, thank you both, Keighty, Jess, for joining us today. We wish you the very best of luck, both in your own athletics and with your businesses moving forward. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another edition of Runners High. Tune back in 2 weeks' time for another edition, and we can't wait to see you again then. Until then, run safe and strong. We'll chat again soon.